we have drifted into talking about architecture and history, which also forms a part of literature. But if we can gather these different strands together, I think we will be able to work out and take home with us a clearer image of what the value of architecture and history, etc., is in the context of any literary work or vice versa. I'll begin with a little anecdote. During COVID, we had to look after our workers. People were unemployed and there was hunger. And so we said we'll work on the external areas, the gardens and so on, so that people get a living. And we said we're going to build a set of flower beds for which we need some earth to be able to raise the level, the usual gardening. And there was great excitement because I was woken up from an afternoon sleep and told that 2 coins had been found. The coins were blackened, and when they were cleaned, which I'm now told we should not have done, it turned out to be coins from the reign of William IV and another from the reign of Queen Victoria. And we said, let's look further. These were earth piles which were being excavated and just brought to the garden. And as it was being leveled, some of these coins were coming out. We have been able to gather 30 of them. So I'm rich. Some of them are on display in our college museum. And you might wonder, why do I tell you of this little incident? It means that where the JCB, the excavator, was used, there must have been a home. There must have been a series of homes. And homes occupied by people who were not terrifically wealthy, but for whom 30 pieces of silver, which incidentally was the price to betray Christ, 30 pieces of silver were available and could be found. And so the romance began. Matka hoga. There must have been a pot. It must have been put into the earth, because you see in those days when nobody trusted the banks. There were no banks in any case. William IV was busy dying while Victoria was following her Kensington system and growing up. Okay? And in distant Lucknow, India, there was a habitation occupied, we presume, by very simple, ordinary people who felt that the best way to keep wealth was to bury it in the ground. Now, the reason why I start with this is to tell you that Lucknow is not a city of palaces. No city is. Lucknow, like any other city, is a city where there will be immense wealth, which will be reflected in its architecture. There will be a vibrant middle class, which will look at whatever is convenient and comfortable. And there will always be those who are at the thin edge of the wedge, who need to bury their silver coins in order to protect them. What we discuss in architecture, unfortunately, is only the fancy stuff, including the palace where I live, okay? Despite the jealousy of some, right? Now, what has happened to where the dhobis lived? What has happened to where the simple agriculturalists lived? We don't pay attention to that. We do look at these huge rambling houses which is impossible to maintain. I repeat, impossible to maintain. I run an institution, and by a combination of different systems, it is possible to fund conservation and restoration, and that too at a price which keeps us in debt for some time. But the simple living and the ordinary people, how did they live, we're not very sure about. And this is where I want to link it to literature. When you read any literary work, a literary work always takes place, the action takes place in a certain physical setting. We will talk about the long carriage drive. I'm talking about Western literature. We will talk about dances and a great hall. We will talk about giant staircases and upper rooms. We will talk about action below stairs where the servants were. In literature, you find that which we don't even have photographs of today. I remember teaching children in a class certain areas from Dickens's Great Expectations, where the most depressing images of London are provided. Soot-filled walls, blackened, the noise of the carts going on the cobblestones, so disturbing that the law courts had to order that straw be placed on those cobblestones so that the wheels, the noise of the wheels, would not disturb them. Imagine the rain after that, and then the fungus, and then the smell. It's a physical setting. So when we look at architecture, whether it is Lucknow, whether it is London, or any part of the world, you get to know how people live, how people lived. We are very happy gaining more wall space today by completely closing up the taps that you have in old houses. ये ठीक नहीं लगता है. Yeah, put something for puja into it. Make it into a decoration piece. But remember, that was your source of light. That was what would reflect light for the whole room. We no longer need that, agreed. And it is no use, whipping a dead horse and saying, we just got to keep it alive, We have to move on. But, say the kind of work that Maruf is doing, is definitely so useful for us to be able to understand ourselves in this context. Notice the first question from the audience today was, what happened more than 300 years ago? The question also moved into, was there such a thing as Hindu architecture? Why do we ask these questions today? Because they are relevant today. How far back can we go in history when we are finding shivlings in the most unlikely of places? Okay? Why do we need to go back 300 or more than 300 years? Why do we need to ask about the way in which communities coexisted? The architecture is one more step, one more physical evidence of the way in which people must have lived. What were kitchens like, I wonder? Were there open fireplaces? Where were utensils stored? Where was washing up done? Was there the concept of a scullery as you would have in Western Europe? How did these things happen? And what about the water? Where would it be kept? How would it be kept pure? From architecture, we start looking at all these things. Ritu talked about the way in which we adapted our architecture to suit the climate. Come to Lamartiniere and you will see that the same thing was done by a man who had the expertise as well as the wealth to be able to experiment with architecture. Building 4 wells deep into the earth, where there is water still today. The water table is still filling those wells, allowing the air to go up from, the cool air to come up from those wells, to be able to cool the entire 9 floors that one has. To be able to see that the rainwater does not go out, but that the rainwater pours within to replenish those wells. Okay? That too is living architecture, which we are now rediscovering, and I'm happy to have been able to contribute towards organizing this kind of development. And so, when Jerry speaks of asking to talk about Claude Martin, remember, was eccentric and a man with a phenomenal amount of money. How did his servants live? How does his estate officer live? Where did they live? What about the history of a certain Mahal Sarai that we have on that estate? Who were the travelers who came there? What were the rules for it? For how long could you stay? Was there enough of ventilation? Was food also provided? Why is the Mahal Sarai now no longer seen as a Nawabi style building, but gradually changed into a colonial bungalow? What were the steps by which it happened? When we start answering questions like this, we begin to understand a city a little better. Otherwise, we are beating our breasts, how the old buildings are going. Of course, some of the damn things must fall. Right? Oh, how sad it is, okay, then we can't project it. Bring your personal wealth and do it. If you can. Nobody will do that. Oh, but this is our heritage and we must not get rid of it. I guess you must. If you have to get your daughter married, you must sell this and move into a flat. So, a city is a living entity. Okay? You cannot say that which was built 50 years ago must now not be touched. Because 175 years ago, the institution which I now am in was a brand new building, which must have actually looked pretty hideous. If you actually look at Lamartiniere now, because of 200 years of romance, everybody's in love with it. But if you actually sit down and look at each element, it is so mixed, it is so muddled, that you would wonder, why was this erected in the first place? So architecture reflects a city. I request 2 things, and I hope Ritu will be able to do this. Come and research what I just now talked about, the Mahal Sarai. And then come and research what today we call the dairy in our college. It is a huge expanse of buildings which, like mews, have been converted from original cattle sheds into human habitation. It goes back to the 1860s. There you will see how a particular building's usage has changed. What was built for cows, the rooms at the side to keep the dairy equipment brought out from England at that time. A cold room now occupied by servants of the college, of whom almost every one of them have air conditioning. That building exists, but the story of the building is no longer relevant or is no longer talked about. So if we are to talk about a vibrant Lucknow, and it is, the most vibrant city. It's my city. It's where I was born, and where even if I have to kill myself in order to die, okay, it should be done here. Alright? So it's the most wonderful city with all these different layers, each of them to be understood gradually.